Hi, I'm Margie with the Asking Spot, and this is my latest. It is a curb find. It's obviously needs a little bit of help, but structure-wise, it's sturdy and I kind of like the look of it. No clue what I'm going to do with it as far as when I get done, because it's just kind of a big stool. But before it could go into the landfill, I thought I gotta give it a shot, right? So to clean first and then to use a heat gun to remove the paint. Now I have used a heat gun to remove paint before very successfully, but they were on doors, so there was a lot of flat surfaces. This thing's kind of detailed, so we'll see. Okay, about 20 minutes of work here went into this, and it's progressing. Ooh, that's still warm. This was a cool trick I found. Heat it, then come back through for the curve spots. These brushes really work. But here's the thing. I don't know if the camera's picking this up or not, maybe with my hair. I am just dripping wet with sweat everywhere, and it's not just because the hot air thing. It's like 88 here, and this is gonna have to be a winter project, because I love the fact that all I have to do to clean up this mess that I've made is just sweep it up, put it in the trash. It's not like when you use a chemical stripper where you have to properly dispose of it. So I vastly prefer doing it this way, and it's coming along about the same amount of time, just because usually the chemical stripper, you put it on and leave it sit and then come back, whereas this one, it's just a constant process of working. But it's just too hot. Maybe I'll do this at night. I don't know, it's Florida, it doesn't get that cold here. So now I'm going with another thing that needs proper ventilation. The only difference though is, of course, this doesn't take a lot of manual labor on my part. I really hate the cleanup, and I wouldn't resort to this except for the fact that I needed this for another project. So I still have some left over. May as well give it a shot on that. So at this point, I had to stop doing the video because at one point I accidentally went up and I was just sweating, and I wiped some sweat off of me, not realizing that there was just the tiniest bit of stripper until this started to burn, and then I had to rush in and clean and do everything like that. I probably won't film anymore because I think I'm just going to take some mineral spirits and just calm the whole thing down. Yeah, this could sit on here for 24 hours and maybe it will come off better. But the weird thing is all my scrapers, I finally found that one that's like super sharp, and it turns out it was working better on just the paint by itself. So I might even just try scraping it, Or I might go with another idea. I want to do something different with this stool, so I don't even need to take the paint off. But now I'm this far into the process, I'm at least going to finish that, but not necessary. I have to say, the heat that we are experiencing, it is exceptionally hot early in the season. So my tolerance for doing these techniques is minimal. So that might weigh into how I feel about these things or how effective they were. This is the side that I used the blowgun and the heat gun. Blowgun, heat gun. And as you can see, it did really pretty well. I felt like it did an almost cleaner job, and oh my goodness, cleanup way easier. You just swept it, put it away. Here is what the chemical stripper did. Ta-da! Now, when I first started doing it, it didn't do so hot. It just, I didn't leave it on long enough. Out of frustration, I just walked away from it with the saran wrap on it. I should say, I went off to make dinner and da-da-da-da-da. But in truth, I was just really frustrated with it. Left it on about 4.5, maybe 5 hours. Came back, and I will say, the longer I left it on, it did become much easier to come off. However, it was such a pain to clean up, and wearing the gloves, oh my goodness, you thought I was hot before. I thought it was hot before. That sounded wrong. No. And then here's what really annoys me is because this is the side. This is what I did with just scraping it off. Yeah. It's not perfect. Actually, this is a lot of the gooey stuff because it doesn't come quite off. But this part, this is where I scraped it. And it was coming off. It wasn't that bad. So, in the end, what am I going to try and do? I'm going to try and sand some more. It's not going to be perfect. I'm just trying to get it to smooth point because I have decided I am going to cover up the whole thing. It's these spindles. It used to be that when people would say something about painting wood and everybody would get all angry about it, I used to think it's their piece of furniture. If it's keeping it from a landfill, have at it. But now I get it. And it's a nice piece of wood because this really is. It's dark enough wood. It's got a tiny enough grain. I don't know what it is. It is definitely hardwood though, because when I was doing my scraping and everything else to it, very rarely did I get any nicks in this. So that's kind of an indication that this has got to be a hardwood. And overall, I love the craftsmanship of it. Just really hate that it was painted. What I'm about to do may seem a little off considering all the work I put into trying to get the paint off on this piece. But as I kept going, I realized it was more or less defeating me and I wasn't getting it done. A couple other things came into mind was that I like it. What I want to do, I think I'm going to like even more. And as long as I'm not planning on selling it, I'm going to go for that. And then the other thing, and probably a major thing, is as I kept looking into the piece, some of these blocks and bars were a different wood than other parts of it, the spindles and stuff. So it's got me thinking that maybe the integrity of this piece as a, nice wood isn't as nice as I thought it was in the first place. Or at least that's what I keep telling myself, because I'm done. But decoupage, here it is. So, with some napkins I picked up at the craft store. Don't you love the pattern? I'm going to go to town. Now, each napkin you get, it's either going to be 2 or 3 ply. And this one seems to be 2 ply. Cool. You could eliminate, there's like a textural border. You could cut that off if you wanted it super smooth. But considering the areas I'm going into, I should be just fine. but you simply separate your two-ply.
Separating them was remarkably enjoyable. Now I'm just moving on to giving myself kind of a rough measurement of what I need from the tissue paper. And yes, it takes me a little while to figure out, hey, if you fold it, it will cut better in the cutting board. Yeah, no, I did write the rest of them. I prepped up a few pieces in advance, and then it was time to put down a light coat of the decoupage or whatever adhesive medium you're going to use. To apply the decoupage, I'm going to try a different technique I found.
The idea is you put out some cling wrap, and then you want to make sure that you have it wet first. So otherwise, whatever you're trying to straighten out will just stick to it. Sort of smoothing it out as well. You want to be generous with your water. Now you want the dull side, top side up. That makes sense? I hope so. And the idea is gently smoothing this out. It's a pre-smooth. I'm not seeing bubbles, but I'm still getting wrinkles.
This technique, it totally worked. And for someone more patient than myself, they might actually continue on with it. But the weird thing is while this was beautiful and great, I started noticing that I didn't have to say move it with the saran wrap. I could just get it wet on the saran wrap and then just pick it up and put it on the piece. And that worked just as well.
Hey, kind of like it. Damp it off. And now we can put our decoupage on to stick it down.
What's really sad is how long it took me to figure out that this wasn't very messy. There were no fumes to worry about, so I could do this inside the air conditioned house. I eventually did move there, and that's how I finished the rest of this piece.
Okay, so the decoupage, I just, ah, I mean, usually when I get excited about something, it's just, wow, it worked out like I planned it. But with this one, I just love it. It didn't just work out like I planned it. I think it's really pretty and fun. Obviously, this is my cup of tea. If you want to do any other decoupage, go for it. Big tip here is if you've got, a lot of people say, oh, don't paint the wood, don't paint the wood, it's pretty. And I actually don't paint wood because I do think it's pretty, but I'm also under the camp of, it's yours. You obviously do what you want. Except for now, thanks to this piece, if you're doing something with spindles, please don't paint it. Instead, decoupage it, because while I used a lovely floral print on here, you certainly could just use a solid color if that's your case. And there are so many other types of decoupage that you could do with, these napkins. Your patterns and choices are endless. All I have left now to do is I need to do some touch-up paint around here because of some of this has worn off. I want to make that fresher and nicer. And then a top coat, and for that I am going to use a matte finish because I kind of like how this looks like fabric. The only thing is I'm going to try something new because so often when you do a top coat on decoupage, you start to get the bubbling. And yes, experience has taught me that if you leave it be, it will dry normally. But I think maybe I'm going to try this and see if it doesn't work too. This is generally used on paintings or pastel drawings and stuff. I actually got it from my late mother, but I think if I put this on here, I can maybe get a base coat before I add any further top coats. I have no clue if this is gonna work, but I thought I'd give it a try. For the top of this, I'm gonna go ahead and stick with the high gloss on it for my top coat because it had already had it, and I deliberately didn't want to paint every nook and cranny over, so I kind of just brushed over it so it would all blend in where I was fixing some areas that needed paint. So this ought to do just great. Here for the bottom, I am going to use a matte finish. Why the different brands? Why the different companies? No reason, it's just where I was shopping, where I picked them up. Of course, if you have better details as to why I should use one brand or the other, I'd love to hear it in the comments below.
My quick tip here is after you brush on your first coat of top coat, when you've got something really detailed, go back through with a completely dry brush and wipe up like the thicker parts.
Normally, when I'm about to put on a second coat of a top coat, I just go off with a nice light sand, maybe a 320 grit. Because we're dealing with decoupage and the paper absorbs so much of the first coat, what I'm using to sand is just more paper. I want it super light. I just want to give the polyacrylic a little bit of teeth so it will adhere to the next layer of polyacrylic. Rubbing this up here because the serious artist of the family is actually working on their own project. Da-da-da-da. They're using puffy paint and fabric paint to paint the sweater, which I think turned out great. I think you can recognize the skyline there. Hello, Chicago. When you just know it, I move inside, and now the long guys are done outside. Anyway, long and the short of it, here is what I learned about decoupage through this project and a couple others. Number one, when you're using either a napkin paper, decoupage paper, or maybe you're using origami paper like I've done in another project, wet it. Wet it first, it makes it far more forgiving and easier to apply. Speaking of applying, apply a light coat of your adhesive medium, whatever that case is too. That's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3, use smaller pieces. Now, the big widthwise one where it was smooth and even, that was no problem. I could use that size of piece. But when it came to the spindly parts, it went on without bubbles because I did wet it, but it would get too crinkled up because there was too much of it. So just smaller pieces, patience, take your time. That leads to lesson number 4 is prints work better. The busier the pattern, the easier it is to blend and hide things, and it kind of makes it just all go together that much easier. And lesson number 5 is kind of something I've learned with every project I do, or at least I try to keep this one up, is when you are doing something for the first time, practice on something you don't care about or you aren't too invested in. It's absolutely free. I saved it from a landfill. It wasn't exactly what I intended to do when I first got it, but because I learned so much from it, I'm thrilled and I really like the results. I thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing and coming back and checking out the channel. Hope it inspires you to reuse, recycle, and restore whenever possible. Thanks. Put on. They're not gonna finish. Meanwhile, I'm melting. That was all poor volume.